Greetings, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon, the show I'm doing to celebrate the fact that the hobby of tabletop role-playing game, which has meant a lot to me, both as a hobby and as a profession, is now 50 years old. We've reached a half century, and I think that's worth celebrating. So I'm inviting lots of folks on who have worked on various games, and just to chat about that. Just kind of talk about how things are going. I've met and know a lot of interesting people, and I don't get to see them in person as much as I'd like. So I have to make up a show to get them to come on and talk to me. Yeah, while I do that, you may know. Sorry, I just kind of wandered off into Stanland for a second. While we have the conversations, I will be working on a cartoon homage to a classic piece of art from a gaming product. Very often it's a cover, but not always. This week it is a cover. And it's a cover for a game that is published by my guest this week, who is an award-winning designer and the president, one of the founders of Ronin Publishing, and also someone who spent a bunch of time in New York, which is where I grew up too. So we often have that in common when we're chatting. So I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I'm sure it'll be fun. I'm going to bring on here Mr. Chris Pramas. Hello, Chris Pramas.
Hello, Stan.
Good to
Nice
see you,
to see
sir. See, I'm looking here. Michael J. Pastor is in the chat. Thank you, Michael, for showing up. He says we got 7 thumbs up before we even started. Wow, that's great. I've been talking about this for a year. I guess people might be listening.
Nice.
So I was thinking about it as I was getting ready to do this, and I don't really have a clear memory of when we met. I mean, I got to know you best when we were working at Wizards together, but I have the real gut feeling like I didn't meet you there. I knew you from conventions, at least in passing, before that. Do you have?
Yeah, that seems right. We may have met at Origins, maybe.
Yeah.
Because like Gen Con's kind of a whirlwind, but Origins was always the better show for like hanging out with people.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I remember when I wound up coming to Wizards and you were there. Were you there already, or you came in short? It was about the same time that the TSR folks came out from Wisconsin.
It was a little later for me. I came in March of '98, and I think you all showed up in '97.
Yeah, middle '97.
Yeah,
kind of a rolling introduction of people over the second half of the year. Hello, Dale Donovan. Hello, Joseph Wolf. Thank you guys for showing up. Pleasure to see y'all. As Michael J. Pastor did point out, we've got people giving us the thumbs up on the platform. I'm sure he's watching on YouTube. Whatever platform you're watching on, if you could take a second and just hit whatever, it's a thumbs up or a like or a heart, it helps the show in that it helps the algorithms decide to share it with other people, and that's what we want. We want more people joining us.
Word.
Yo. So I usually start these conversations exploring how gaming came into your life, because you and I come from the generation where tabletop role-playing games, anyway, were invented about the time that we could possibly have come into it. It's not something that didn't pre-exist. Though
right.
I think that you had as strong or maybe a stronger background in minis and wargaming, which did have a much longer history.
Mm-hmm. I started with RPGs, though.
Okay.
It was RPGs that got me into miniatures, and then into miniatures gaming. But to start with, when I was less than 10 years old, Yeah, I was playing family games, Battleship and uh,
Right.
Monopoly and that sort of thing. But I was a very early reader, and I started reading sci-fi and fantasy by the time I was, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that. Um,
What kind of stuff? What kind of stuff were you reading?
um, God, I'm trying to remember what the earliest stuff read was. God, I was reading the uh, God damn it, Philip Jose Farmer, the River World,
World?
River,
Riverworld?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and God, it's like early sci-fi that I, sorry, can't remember. It's a long time
Fair enough.
ago.
Was it because I know I didn't get introduced to it till later, but the Isaac Asimov had a Lucky Star series, a bunch of kind of what now would be young adult sci-fi that was out
Hmm.
there, and uh, so no one showed me that until I was in college.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, the big thing for me was Lord of the Rings,
yeah,
which I read when I was 10, um, and uh, and that was the same year I got into D&D. So
yeah.
um, that like I'm a very typical nerd of the era, I guess, because Lord of the Rings and D&D were very formative things for me that literally did change the direction of my life, such as it
So
was when I was 10.
how did you happen into D&D? Did did you hear about it, or did someone introduce you to it?
So what happened was, this was an era where soon after the Satanic Panic started,
Hmm.
but my mom actually read about D&D in one of those like Sunday newspaper magazines, like Parade or something like that.
Right.
Um, and she was like, "Oh, well, you like fantasy and things like that. Like, maybe you should check this out." And so my brother and I went to Eric Fuchs Hobbies in Salem, Massachusetts,
Okay.
and got the white boxed set of D&D. Um, and so we got that home and tried to figure out how the hell to play it. But the white box set of D&D was very much designed for people coming out of the 1960s wargaming scene,
Right.
and not like 10-year-olds who still only had a vague idea what role playing was. so, but hey, it was 1979. So after that, we got the Holmes basic set. And and that was where we really started to figure out playing. And from there, jumps pretty quickly to AD&D. So this was all like before the red box,
Right.
Um, so like a lot of people slightly younger than me, like they have all these great memories of how the red box introduced them to D&D, and by the time that came out, I was like, that's for kids. I'm 12.
I mean, like you, I came in through the Holmes box, and that's why that stupid dragon painting means so much.
Mm,
Um, but
nice.
I find it. I mean, it's interesting every time I look at the history of D&D, how hard it was how, to for a long time to figure out how to play the game.
Yeah.
Right? It was the game always came with the assumption that you had some amount of knowledge, and often a lot. Right? But
Yeah.
the between the Holmes box and the red box, there turned out to be good products eventually. But it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of us, I think a lot of game designers in our era come in with the idea of it's okay to make it a little tough to climb into the game because if you want
Hmm.
it, you'll do it because that's what we did.
Yeah. I I remember during the design of third edition D&D. Monty Cook talking about the idea that the rules should be something that you have to master. There's rewards for
Yeah.
getting deep into the rules and that sort of stuff. So I remember that discussion. Um, but yeah, we at first played with a guy my brother's age, and we used to play at the library, the public library in Peabody, Massachusetts, which is where I'm from originally, um, until we got kicked out because my brother was being obnoxious. uh, but anyway, that guy was one of those GMs who was like super into like being in charge,
Oh,
and well, we didn't last all that long playing with him. So we kind of spun off and began playing with some other people. Um, yeah, but
did you?
formative time.
I'm sorry. What?
Formative time.
Yeah. did you? Um, did you get into games other than D&D or
Oh
early?
yeah,
Or
yeah. Well, so I wasn't playing D&D that long until I learned about Dragon Magazine, and I was like, hey, there's a whole magazine about this. So I started getting Dragon, and that was my entry point into the wider world of hobby games.
hmm,
Um, I knew about more TSR games. Like we had Gamma World, and we played that,
yeah,
and got Star Frontiers and tried to play that. But for stuff beyond TSR, back in that era, Dragon still had articles about all kinds of different things, all sorts of different games, and also advertising from a lot of companies and things. So I ended up getting into like Avalon Hill games because I saw ads and things in Dragon Magazine. So, I was playing like Squad Leader and Machiavelli when I was pretty young, things like that. And then, I started branching out into other RPGs as well. So I remember I was very excited to get a copy of Chivalry and Sorcery, and then I tried to make sense of the magic rules, and my mind exploded. So, uh,
Darren Drader is here, and he says he's having a hard time hearing me today. So, interestingly, when we're getting in our pre-show, we had a couple of problems with Chris's microphone. I
yeah,
didn't know I was gonna. That is, of course, I'm gonna be the problem. So, that's how it goes. That's how it rolls.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. When I was doing my curated quarantine series in 2020 and 2021, which was a thing I did where I talked about a game every day from my collection for a year.
right.
So when I was doing that, I had the opportunity to go back and really read some of the early RPGs from the 70s and into the 80s. And, it was, I don't want to say shocking, that's too strong a word, but I don't know, surprising often, like how little there was, or it's like, here's a box, and then like it's, a 32-page rule book and another 32-page rule book and some dice, and that's it. And you know the lack of clear explanations about how you actually play the game was a frequent
Yeah.
uh, frequent issue in those days.
Michael J. Pastor asked if you got into Traveler. Is that one of the things you played at that time?
Uh, Only a little bit. But like the cousin of my next door neighbors was into Traveler, and he ran us through a couple of sessions, but it didn't really stick. And so um, I I've since become very good friends with John Kovalik, and I've been in his basement, and I have seen John's Traveler collection, which is like unbelievable. you
Eh,
know, he had all the like the FASA modules
right.
that they did, and the Game Lords did a bunch, and he had box sets of Games Workshop miniatures, which were like 15 millimeter, and I didn't even know had existed ever.
Wow.
It's like, wow, look at all this stuff. So yeah, maybe I should have gone more down that route, but I
Uh,
didn't.
there
Yeah,
only, we can all only walk one road.
yeah,
You go down one route, you're not going to be doing the others.
yeah, yeah.
So
For
you
gaming, like I really preferred fantasy for my RPGs for quite a while.
right?
Yeah.
So did you play straight through? Do you ever have a drop off in your gaming? Like I played for a while and then couldn't in around high school. I didn't want I didn't want to not be the nerd playing D&D. I just couldn't find other nerds to play D&D with, and I didn't. So I had to drop off until college. And I know other people have had segments in that. Do you
So I played, all through junior high and high school. Um, I even did things in high school, like play in a 2 year long space opera campaign from Fantasy
right?
Games Unlimited. And that was one of the games I looked at in curated quarantine. I'm like, how the hell did we play this for 2 years? So I thought that maybe when I got to college, I don't know why I thought this, but I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to game there, which was in retrospect a silly notion. But I moved to New York City, which is very exciting for me, and I wasn't there longer than a couple of weeks, and I had been at a show at CBGB, and I came back into my dorm, and there was a group of people playing D&D, and they were playing Dragonlance modules. So I introduced myself to them, and as it happened, I had just recently read the first like 6 Dragonlance novels, so I was all up on the lore. So they invited me to play, and I was like, great. And then we had a club called the Society for Strategic Gaming, which was funny because we didn't do a whole lot of strategic gaming, but we did role playing.
Good.
So yeah, so I joined in, and then all throughout college, we got really into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. In that period, that kind of became our big game of choice. But and that's also when I got more deeply into miniatures games too.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna switch over here, and I'm gonna start. I'm gonna be doing a homage today to one of your books. Uh, you design and you publish the
Mhm.
Fantasy Age Core Rulebook,
That's
second
right.
edition.
Yeah, by
Um,
the one and only Wayne Reynolds.
you know what? I think that of all the artists that I've done homages to in the last year plus, I think
Yeah.
Wayne is the one that's popped up most often now. He
Mm.
passed Jeff easily one or two homages ago.
People really associate him with Paizo, but I just want to stake the claim that we had him first. So
Well, I mean, I remember Wayne did some stuff for the third edition core books, and they
yeah.
kept leaving him out of the credits.
Oh, did they? Well,
Yeah, not on purpose, and they'd
yeah.
give him extra work because of it. They, oh, we're sorry, Wayne. Here's some more stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a whole series of really iconic Freeport covers for us back in the, I don't know, 2002 to 2008, something like that. So when we were going to do um, second edition Fantasy Age, where we were more explicitly going to combine the Fantasy Age rules with the Freeport setting, um, we had to get Wayne to do it. So
All right, so let's your career covers a lot of ground. So let's jump ahead to how did you um, make the jump into work, professional game work?
So I was in college. I tried to get some work writing for magazines. Um, I used to read White Wolf magazine before it merged to become a game studio, and they were looking for a a line reviewer for the Pendragon game from Chaosium, and I love Pendragon, still do. So I was like, oh, this would be great. I'd love to, do this, but Stuart Wick decided to do it. So,
Yeah.
and then later on, before his sad and tragic passing, he published Pendragon for a little while. So good on him, and also boo, sad. Um, anyway, so I tried getting magazine work, didn't really succeed, but then at the time I was super into the Ars Magica role playing game,
Mm-hmm.
which is these days published by Atlas, but it was originally published by Lion Rampant. It's the company that merged with White Wolf Magazine to make White Wolf Game Studio. And so, anyway, there was this guy in the Twin Cities area named Peter Henches, and Peter had a Ars Magica fanzine called Redcap. So the first game industry writing I did that was published in any way was for Redcap fanzine. So at the time, I had started going to Gen Con in like 1989. And after my first year or two, I decided to start running games at Gen Con. And so I was running these 2-round Ars Magica tournaments. So I wrote up a whole covenant and all this stuff. And essentially all that work turned into an article in Redcap. So then in 1993, I was living with Aaron Loeb, a very good friend of mine, who's gone on to much success in the video gaming world, produced Simpsons Untapped, so feather in his cap. Anyway, we were both wanting to have careers in games, so we made what we jokingly called a dark pact. We would try to help each other in making our careers go. So he knew the developer at Mayfair Games, a guy named Doug Tabb, and they were publishing a game called Ray Winninger's Underground, which was a really groundbreaking RPG that was ahead of its time and also reality, because it had crazy notions like that Rush Limbaugh became vice president, and how could such a thing ever happen? Anyway, so they had somebody drop out of a project, and Aaron was able to pick up the work, and I knew the game better than him, so I could help him and he could help me. So we did some work for the Underground game that was published in 1994 for the Underground Companion and the Underground Player's Manual or Handbook, I forget which. So that was my first published work. And then from there, I just began to do freelance writing around the industry, stuff that I could get. So I ended up working on Warhammer Roleplay, Fantasy Roleplay, which is very exciting. Hogshead Publishing was publishing the game at that time, and James Wallace was the publisher. So I wrote an adventure for him that was part of a big campaign called The Dying of the Light. I did some work on Over the Edge, another Atlas game, and ended up working on the Last Unicorn Star Trek game a little bit towards the end. Well, by the end, I mean the end of my freelance career, which was a few years later. But yeah, I did that for a couple of years. Met people, started to build relationships, and the more freelance work that you do, the easier it is to get more freelance work.
Right.
So yeah, I started to kind of make a name for myself in that arena. And then really too soon, I decided I wanted to start a company. as many had done before me.
It's always too soon.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's ironic because my future wife, Nicole, advised me at the time that I probably shouldn't do it.
And she's paying for it to this day.
Yeah, yeah. So this was a company called Ronin Publishing, which was my first company, and that was me and my brother Jason and my friend Neil, and we bought a game called The Whispering Vault that Mike Neisel had designed and published, and I had done some freelance work for that,
Hmm.
and Mike wanted to sell it, so we bought it from him and started our publishing careers. So that's how I got into publishing. That company was a struggle. We didn't really know enough of what we were doing, and trying to start with a game that had already been out a little bit and had kind of a moribund period was difficult. And we ended up publishing a feng shui source book that I had written for Daedalus Entertainment, but then Daedalus had all sorts of monetary and other problems, and so they allowed me to publish it through my own company. But by the time we published it, um, they weren't even selling core rule books for the game anymore. So hard to sell a source book for a game that's not on shelves currently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of how that went. But I did learn a lot. Obviously, running a company is a very different enterprise than just being a freelancer. So that really, deepened my ties with a lot of people and taught me a lot of things. And it was while I was doing that I decided to move to Seattle. So because I had met the aforementioned Nicole, and we were hoping to get together. So I decided to move to Seattle for love, but also,
Hello.
yeah, Seattle, pretty good place to be if you were trying to make a career in the game industry. So I landed here. I tried to make a living as a full-time freelancer for 6 months, and that's hard because of pay on publication contracts. So, if you're counting on, oh, I'm going to get my rent money from this job, and then the publisher's like, we decide to push it off 3 months, like you're holding the bag. So,
It's so,
but
yeah. It's so the trying to make a living as a freelancer is
yeah,
always weird. But in back in the days when, as you say, the pay on publication was the standard, that's just crazy.
yeah, yeah. um, so thankfully, Wizards was advertising for an RPG designer about that time. And so I applied for it and did some interviews. And it ended up being down to me and Rich DeCan, who was another freelancer of my era. And he lived in Florida, and I was already in Seattle, so I got hired because I could like start the next week. But don't cry for Rick because he went on to be one of the publishers of City of Heroes and made a bunch of money in the MMO space. So everybody wins. Anyway, so that got me into Wizards as an RPG designer, which is where we met.
Right?
Well, not met, as we've established, where we got to know each other better.
Um. So, sorry, I'm just. I was about to ask a question in a way that was going to lead down a negative route rather than explore a positive thought. But I mean, certainly you did a lot of things at Wizards. You came on. You were on the team that was supposed to do a Magic adaptation, but it didn't happen. And then
Correct.
Greyhawk, and then you went
Yeah.
on. You did work on the minis team. So, when you think about your time at Wizards, what was the best stuff you got to work on?
Um, well, so uh, I did come in to work on what I believe was the third attempt to have a magic D&D sort of thing, or a magic role-playing game of any kind. But because of the TSR acquisition, the attempt was going to be for D&D rules with a magic setting. So I was supposed to be the setting guy, and then our team was Jonathan Tweet doing rules design. Um, Tolkien scholar and great guy John Ratliff was going to be our line editor. And then we had Jesper Meerfors, original Magic art director, who was supposed to art direct. And we had the excellent Elena Kapoman as our assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah, an excellent person who I have remained friends with all these years. Um, so, it was a pretty good team, but it suffered from the internal politics of Wizards, which was basically like the Magic team really didn't have any interest in playing nice with the D&D team. So
Yeah.
eventually that project was scrapped. And at that point, I was moved on to do other D&D stuff. Um, as someone who got into the hobby with D&D at age 10, getting to write official D&D books was pretty fucking cool. So I wrote The Guide to Hell in that
Right.
period. I co-wrote Slavers, which was a sequel to the classic Slave Lords adventures with Sean Reynolds. I did something that was eventually called The Vortex of Madness, um, but its original life was supposed to be a book called Planar Sites, which was supposed to be part of the series that included castle sites and city sites.
Right.
So I designed 5 very disparate locations out on the plains that weren't designed to really have any connection to each other. And then after I turned the book over, it was decided that it would sell better as an adventure. And so then other devs took on the unenviable job of trying to stitch that together into a story that made sense. so um, so if you read it now, you can see how, oh yeah, these really don't have anything to do with each other at all. So they created a framing device that used the mighty machine of Luke O. Anyway, so I did that. Um, I co-wrote an alternity book for the Dark Matter line with J.D. Weicker called The Final Church. Yeah, Final
Yeah.
Church. Um, and anyway, the sort of year and a half I was working on RPG stuff, um, there was chatter about how Wizards want to try to get into miniatures. And being a big minis gaming fan, I was excited by this notion. And particularly like when I came in with all the TSR people who, had come in before me and of course worked for, in many cases, decades on the game. Um, like I was working with Skip Williams, right? And so like Skip was always going to be my very senior. And I felt like I could make more of a mark working in a new division than continuing to work on the RPG side. Um, so I ended up through a long process joining the new miniatures division at Wizards, working under Bob Watts. And that's a long whole story unto itself.
All right. Fair enough. Um, so, you did you leave Wizards of your own accord, or were you in one of the early rounds of layoffs that started to hit?
I did not leave of my own accord. So basically, I started working in miniatures. I had a frustrating experience, and what we were trying to do kept changing and changing. And a game finally came out, and like a year later was canceled. So that was that. But in the middle of that, I found I missed doing more role playing writing, so I decided to just start my own little company on the side
Right.
to kind of keep my finger in the role playing game pie. And that was Green Ronin. So, started that in 2000. The first thing I published was a game called Orc, the role playing game, which was designed by my friend Todd Miller, or he did the background and I designed the rules. He was a member of my college game group, and he took what were semi D&D campaigns that didn't really involve much dice rolling yeah, into the world of orcness, as it was dubbed. So that was our first thing, and then this is in the year 2000. That was the year when the Open Game License and the D20 System Trademark License were first floated. And I was working at Wizards, so I was involved in meetings and stuff about the OGL and what the hopes were for it, and so on. And so one of the points that was made was that Wizards had a hard time doing short adventures profitably, and the hope was that with the D20 uh, system trademark license and all that, that basically short adventures could be done by other companies.
Right.
And so, I had a new company and the desire to do role playing stuff. So I was like, well, I could put out a short adventure. Um, so Gen Con third edition, it debuted. I'm sorry, D&D third edition debuted at Gen Con year 2000. So I was able to have Death in Freeport, an adventure that I wrote, uh, out at Gen Con the same day. So Wizards itself did not have an adventure out that Gen Con, but we did, and Atlas Games did. They had one called 3 Days to Kill. So that was a great idea, as it turned out. So that was the start of the whole Green Ronin story. I continued to work for Wizards for another 2 years,
Oh, I
and
didn't realize it had been
occasionally,
that long. I didn't realize it
yeah,
had gone on that long.
yeah, yeah. So occasionally, somebody would come to me and say, "Should you be running your own company while you work here?" And no one had told me not to. So I basically adopted a tactic of when someone said that, I was like, great, let's call a meeting with HR and talk about it. And then nobody wanted to call that meeting. So essentially, I kept doing it as long as I worked there. But I eventually became a creative director on the mini stuff, but I could kind of see the writing on the wall for that. So I was looking at the team working on miniatures at the time, and realized I was the only person who was only working on miniatures. Like Rob
Right.
Hainso, he was doing D&D stuff, and so on. Um, we had Teowin for a little while. So I realized that I was in danger, girl. So I tried to get myself working on Avalon Hill titles at the
Hmm.
time, because Hasbro had basically been like, well, we don't really know what to do with Avalon Hill, so here, you take it. So I met with the head of R&D and tried to pitch him on the idea that I'd been an Avalon Hill gamer since 1980, and sure would be great to work on that. But that didn't go anywhere. And then in the, I don't know, third or fourth round of the post Hasbro buyout layoffs, I got hit. So that was March of '98. Um, so I just stepped into doing Green Ronin full time at that point.
All right, so let's focus on Green Ronin. So, uh,
Yeah.
you you and you and Atlas were the first companies to do D20 products. Uh,
Yeah.
what? How? So first of all, how is Green Ronin different from Ronin?
Oh, well, this is a classic case of the Pramas overthink. So when we were doing Ronin Publishing, the idea of was that the three of us would each have a color coded screen name for our email, like we were in like a Japanese like fighting show sort of thing, or like a giant robot show. So I was the Green Ronin, um, and so I made a screen name to that effect. And then one of my partners decided that he'd be the Black Ronin, but he used Japanese for it. So unless you knew Japanese, that was kind of unclear. And then the other guy decided that really his screen name should be like Ronin Vice President. So the whole scheme like never even worked. But basically, my Green Ronin email address was how I participated in mailing lists like the Weasel list, which was how the
Oh
gamers used to
God,
talk to each other back in the 90s.
I forgot about.
uh,
Well, I didn't forget about it, but I let
yeah,
the Weasel list fall out of my memory on purpose.
yeah, yeah. And also, for a time, there was a very robust area for tabletop role playing games on America Online. And there was like an industry back room that you could get into if you worked in the biz, and that was another place that we could discuss things. So anyway, I wanted people in the industry to understand that this was my company without calling it Chris Pramus Games, which probably would have been easier. But so that's why I picked Green Ronin. And of course, my original company wasn't even around for all that long. And within a few years, like certainly nobody was going to understand the reference. But anyway, that's how we became Green Ronin. And yeah, and so it's originally just me. I founded the company, and then later, when we turned the company into an LLC, Nicole Lindrus and Hal Mangold became partners in the business with me, and they had both been helping out already. So that's how we ended up in our current form.
So what were you doing? So you started with that um, the Orc and Freeport. Freeport did pretty well.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, did really well. Yeah, we took a gamble on it because I printed 10,000 copies of it, not knowing how the whole idea of D20 was going to go.
Right.
And but that was good because then I could sell them all. And it is not super common, that one of your earliest products sells 10,000 copies. So that was very exciting. So the first thing we did was do two sequels to Death in Freeport, um, Terror in Freeport and Madness in Freeport, and those comprised together the Freeport trilogy, as it is now known. Um, and at the time there was just this enormous demand for D20 stuff, and so we just started doing more and more of it. And the early days when there were only a few of us doing it ended pretty quickly because other companies saw, oh hell, there's money to be made doing this, and so lots of new companies formed, lots of older companies jumped in, and it eventually became an overly crowded and overly competitive marketplace. But for a solid 5 years, most of our focus was doing D20 stuff. So, we did class books, race books, campaign setting books, adventures, all kinds of stuff. And then, but also in there, we published the first edition of Mutants and Masterminds, which has ended up as our longest running RPG because Mutants and Masterminds is still going, and it's on its third edition. So that became really a keystone of the company too.
So
And that
crazy is
started.
crazy as it seems, let's pretend there are one or two folks out there who don't know what Mutants and Masterminds is.
Yeah, it's the
What?
world's greatest superhero role playing game.
I'm not going to argue with
So
that.
yeah, Mutants and Mastermind started as a D20 project. Because Steve Kenson, who was another like freelancer that I kind of came up with, he had written a superhero city book for another company, and then that company basically stopped publishing things. So one day he was just kind of lamenting to me that he had designed this whole city book, and it wasn't going to be published. And I said, well, if you design a D20 superhero game for me, I'll publish it. And Steve said, really? And I said, yes. So that's how it started. So the original notion was that it was going to be essentially a supplement to D&D that told you like all the things to change to make it a superhero game. And at that point in the history of the OGL and all that, it was generally felt that you needed to have a D20 logo on your book to indicate that it worked with D&D. And if you put that logo on there, you could not make a standalone rulebook. That was one of the limitations. So during the design process, Steve would say, well, here's a situation where I could cleave to the D20 rules, or I could make it feel more correct for comics. What do you think? And I would always say, make it feel right for comics. That's what we're trying to do here. And adheres to the D&D rules, less important. So ultimately, we decided to forego the D20 logo on it and just make it a standalone game that was really like its own game. You can see the D&D roots of it in the ability scores and things like that. But it's a point build superhero system. You're not advancing character levels. You have power levels that's kind of set how many points you have to build your character, and that's how powerful your character is. It just kind of became its own thing. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
a lot
been
of
going.
people
Yeah.
a lot of people don't remember that. I mean, it comes up in conversations like this. How in the how risky that seemed at the time, right? How the D20 was certainly more powerful than OGL, and in fact, a lot
Mhm.
of people thought if you went just OGL, the audience would never know, and you wouldn't sell 10,000 of them like you were saying.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
go ahead.
It was another gamble. So we decided to promote it by we did a 4-page um, introduction to the game that basically showed off the cover, showed you two characters, and gave you enough rules to like have a little punch up between them. And then we paid to blow in like 20,000 copies of that to the show bag at Gen Con that year. So it really got in front of a lot of people's eyeballs. And yeah, again, a gamble paid off. So that was good. And after us, a lot more companies were willing to do their own standalone games and forego the D20 logo.
Yeah, I'd say over the years, one of the things I've really liked that Green Ronin has done are those short, quick start rules. I mean, you
Mhm.
certainly weren't the first people to do that, but you've done a really great job of, as you say, kind of pre-selling your, like giving people a way to get a taste of your stuff with a
Yeah.
good thing. And a lot of those are still around, or are you still doing that with the current stuff?
Yeah, they're a little bigger now. So basically, what we settled into was for each new game, we do a quick start that they're typically 32 pages.
Mm.
Some of them are 44. Basically, you get an adventure, pre generated characters, and then the rules you need to play. So it's not only you can see what it's like, you can play it. And so when we've been doing crowdfunding campaigns, we try to make sure that we have one of those done for launch. So when we crowdfunded the 5th season role-playing game based on N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy, we had a quick start that you could just get for free before you decided to back it. And we did the same for the Expanse Transport Union Edition, which we crowdfunded at the end of last year. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of them. You can get them off our website or DriveThruRPG for free.
I'm gonna, I gotta come back to this other view because I can change this and show people that go to greenronin.com or greenroninstore.com. And
correct. Correct.
Yes, and you can get those quick starts are still available on top, and then you also know where you can buy the awesome stuff. You're right there.
Amazing. Yeah, there's a bundle that has most of the quick starts in it, so you can download that and get a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, like I say, I'm a big fan of the quick start as a product style. I think in a lot of ways that it harkens back to the Holmes book, right? You just have everything you need to play for a while, and then you can move on. And I think you guys do some of the best.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they're just really useful to have,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Robert Lawson is here. Says the quick start rules for Orc is Orc.
So Rob here is a very old friend of mine. He was in my college game group, and we actually still game together using Roll20 through all these years. And he was in the original Orc campaigns that Todd ran way back when. So, hi, Rob.
All right. So we're gonna, in order to not have this be 8 hours long. So what's going on at Green Ronin now? One of the things I know is going on is, if anyone does the math, if you started in 2000, this is the 25th anniversary for Green Ronin. So
that's
congratulations. Right. That's awesome.
Thank you. It was not something I ever considered could be possible when I started the company. Just thought it was going to be, like a fun little side project.
And yet here you are.
And yet here we are. Yeah, it's wild.
So you've had a bunch of different licensed products over the years. You've done you work with Dragon Age. You're still doing the Expanse, I think.
Yes.
And a bunch of other things. What I don't know. What do you, at 25 years, what do you think is the highlight reel for Green Ronin?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Well, let's see. So, the Freeport stuff, obviously, very important for the company. And we did some really critically acclaimed, like D20 source books back in the day, like Book of the Righteous and Book of Fiends, both of which we actually brought back for 5th edition D&D, so you can get a current edition version of them if you were interested in checking those out. Of course, Mutants and Masterminds and the city that Steve designed, we called it Freedom City. It originally had a different name. But Freedom City became a key property of ours, and it's set in a larger setting that we call Earth Prime. So the Freedom City source book, if you like superhero stuff, is very fun and important setting for the company. We had the Game of Thrones license for a bunch of years. We got it before there was an HBO TV show, which is why we were able to get it. So that was called the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing. And so that's a good thing to check out if you can find a copy. We did a really fun source book for that about the Night's Watch. In the conceit of the main game is that you create a minor noble house, and all the characters in the game are part of the house in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
then so you have individual goals, but also goals for your house as you're engaged in the Game of Thrones. Then what Night's Watch did was take it up north. So instead of being a house, you could be in the Black Watch, the Night's Watch. You could be in the Night's Watch and structure a campaign that way, or you could flip it and you could make a wildling village and you could all play as wildlings. So that's all fun stuff, if you can find it. Dragon Age role playing game was really important. That was an opportunity that came our way from BioWare. They actually contacted us and said, hey, we're working on a spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. We think it'd be cool if it had a TTRPG tied into it, and would you like to do it? And it took me all of half a second to decide that yes, I definitely want to do it. So that was important for a couple of reasons. First, I designed a new game system for it called the Adventure Game Engine, and since then, it's become our house system. So almost all our games, except for Muse and Masterminds, now use the Adventure Game Engine. Um, so there's that, and then also it was like a goal of mine when doing that game to try to offer an alternate route into tabletop gaming, like other than D&D, because I knew there are a lot of people, they
Right.
knew computer RPGs, but they didn't know tabletop. So the initial thing we did was a boxed set, in the style of uh, Holmes Basic or any of those that had like a 64 page player's book, 64-page GM's book, a map, and dice. So I've
Sweet.
subsequently heard from a lot of people, this was my first role playing experience. So that was very gratifying. Um,
I mean, so this book I'm doing the cover of is a second edition for Fantasy Age, for the adventure game. So this is Fantasy Age. Age is adventure game engine.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what happened was we put out Dragon Age. It sold really well. Um, I had gotten to know Will Wheaton through our dear departed friend Andrew Hackard, and I ran Dragon Age for him and other friends a couple times.
Mm.
And so first, he invited me down to be on his tabletop show when they were filming the first season. So the final 2 episodes of that season are me running Dragon Age. And I didn't really know the level that was going to be at. um, I literally thought it was going to be like one guy with a camera. And in fact, it was like a set with multiple cameras and catering and makeup and, like the whole deal. Um, so anyway, so we did that, and then a little later, Tabletop was initially funded by, God, was it Google? Um, Something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So there was a point where Google like gave seed money to a bunch of things, and Geek and Sundry, which did Tabletop, was like one of those things. But eventually they had to be on their own. So they did a crowdfunding campaign for what they just called the RPG show, which was going to be like Tabletop, but it was going to be specifically about RPGs because most of Tabletop was board games. Um, and I thought they were going to do something like Tabletop, where it's like each week it's a different game. But what Will wanted to do was actually a whole campaign, so people could see what playing in a campaign was like. And so he called me up and told me he really wanted to use the adventure game engine. And once again, I was immediately like, hell yes. So that's how Fantasy Age came into being as a separate game. So I basically took the rules part of Dragon Age, but left out all the intellectual property to create the Fantasy Age Basic Rulebook. And then Will and his son and I created this setting called Titan's Grave that was like a science fantasy setting inspired by like Thundar the Barbarian, and old heavy metal magazines and things like that. So we did this whole series called Titan's Grave, which was 10 episodes. We had a great cast, Yuri Lowenthal and uh, good God. Uh, oh, my poor brain. Um, Laura Bailey, Jesus Christ, Allison Hayslip, and Hank Green was the cast. So they were great. And then, so the Gen Con following up on that, which was just like a month later, we debuted Fantasy Age, and we had a Titan's Grave adventure book at the same time, that had the adventures that had been played on the show, but also modified in some ways. So if you watch the show, the whole thing wouldn't necessarily
Right.
be ruined for you. So that was a great high point. I mean, we essentially had like a Will Wheaton streaming show to promote our new game and this new setting that we did together. So you can watch that still on YouTube. And we sold a lot of copies of the Titan's Grave Adventure book. We can't sell it anymore because the license ended, but you should be able to find it out there if you're interested.
Um, and then, so Fantasy Age spawned Modern Age.
Correct. Yes. So after Fantasy Age, we did a second edition of Blue Rose, which changed to the adventure game engine. We did Modern Age. From Modern Age came Cthulhu Awakens, and The Expanse, which was our first sci-fi game to use the adventure
Mm-hmm.
game engine, and then forthcoming fifth season. So yeah, it started as a box set with two 64-page books in it. Has like spawned a lot of gaming goodness.
Another opportunity taken.
Yes,
Um,
I will.
all right, I'm just getting to the top of the hour. I think I'm going to stop my sketching here. Uh,
Look at that.
folks who have
Nice.
watched the show before know I will finish this off screen. You can subscribe to our free newsletter at 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com, and you will get to see the finished version before anyone else. I'm still behind catching up, but I'll get to it eventually. And then I'll make sure I get a copy to the Green Ronin folks too. So
You can
they
show it
can.
off on our Thursday streaming show.
There's yes, I was going to say uh, the thing the, that compares to this is that you've got two weekly live stream shows that are
Mhm.
going on, and one is uh, Mutants and Mastermind centered, and one is Adventure Game Engine centered.
Yes, yes, yes. It is Troy, who usually appears as a disembodied voice. um, he's the one who started up and runs our streaming shows, which he's very excellent at. So we have Mutants and Masterminds Monday. So typically it'll be designer Steve Kenson and developer Alex Thomas, sometimes with special guests and what have you. And then the show on Thursday, which is called Thursdage, that kind of covers all the adventure game engine games. So it could be chatter about Modern Age 1 week, Blue Rose the next, Cthulhu, etc.
Yeah, if folks go to YouTube, Green Ronin Publishing is their page, their channel, and you can catch Thursdage and Mutants and Masterminds live on uh, their Mondays and Thursdays respectively.
Yep.
And it's a good. They're great shows. Great. I love going and hanging out. My schedule used to let me do that a little more freely,
Hmm.
and I spent some time just doing doodling of your shows and sending them
Yeah,
in while while they were up. I miss that. It was a lot of fun, and I just
yeah,
can't get there at the beginning of the show. I can't get there early enough to do it anymore. Um, I keep hoping to. Hey, Alex Thomas is here in the
yeah.
chat,
What do
and
you know? I spoke your name, Alex.
he appears.
Yeah, it was always great having you in the comments, and seeing your doodles and stuff. Yeah.
Um,
The other thing that Troy has done is create a new like center of community for us
yeah,
called the Atomic Think Tank. Basically, like most companies of the aughts, we had forums for a long time, but they became unruly, kind of difficult to manage. And at the point that a lot of companies dropped their forums, we ended up doing the same. And we were on Facebook and G Plus when that was a thing, and so on. Um, but what we discovered over the years was that we didn't really have like one center of our community, and this was a common problem across the industry
yeah,
where discussions were happening in a diffused nature, like all over the place. And so Troy created the Atomic Think Tank, which has forum-like things in it. But basically, there's levels of it that are always free. So if you want to talk about Fantasy Age or Music Masterminds or whatever, you can always go over there and talk about that.
right,
For Music Masterminds, we also have a paid tier. And with the paid tier, you basically get like designer diaries and bonus content and stuff other people aren't seeing, opportunities to play test, and all that. So if
right.
you're really into M&M, that is a good a good thing to subscribe to.
Yeah. So, folks, through either through the shows or over at the Green Ronin site, you can find the Atomic Think Tank. It's a really great community to go and hang out
Yeah,
and it's so welcoming to the newbies who are there. There's a lot of it's a good place to get started, and it's also a good place to hang out with the people producing advanced stuff. I think about some of the problems with forums is they too quickly became places that you only wanted to go if you were already an expert. And I think that
right.
the think tank does a really good job of being a great place to start and then stay and hang around and thrive.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it's working.
Yeah, you're a genius, Pramas, a genius.
Hey, this was Troy's initiative. I can't lay claim, and I wouldn't. Um,
I think your
yeah.
genius is knowing when to say yes.
uh, yeah. I will. If I may quote Bad Santa for a moment, like they can't all be winners, kid. So I
But
have taken some gambles that have not paid off too. So
we're not here
that's
to
part of
talk
the struggle.
for your
Yeah,
25th anniversary. We're not going to focus on those.
great idea.
But next year, I'll have you back on and we'll talk about the losers.
Fair play. Fair play. Yeah.
All
Uh,
right.
should mention we do also have some third-party publishing programs.
Mm-hmm.
So if people want to publish material for some of our games, there are ways to do that. Musa Masterminds has a long-running license called Super Powered by M&M that lets you. It's essentially like how the D20 license used to work, more or less. And that's a free license. We also have two community content programs on Drive Through RPG. One is the Age Creators Alliance, and that lets you publish compatible material with Fantasy Age and Modern Age and Cthulhu Awakens and things like that. And then we also have the Chronicle System Guild. Chronicle System is the game engine that powered our Game of Thrones game.
Right.
So you can get a generic version of those rules called Sword Chronicle, and then publish compatible material with that if you like that system.
Lots of awesome stuff. People can not only come and enjoy your stuff, they can make stuff so other people can enjoy it too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Um, Man, I so we're closing in on the end of the show, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I I find myself thinking about the fact that we hit the 25th anniversary of Green Ronin, which is half of the 50th. So Green Ronin is half of the history of role playing games.
No, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um. So we're heading out into the next quarter, the next 25 years. Uh, do you think that and we've seen a lot of growth recently. I mean, you pointed out Titan's Grave and a bunch of other
Mm-hmm.
things were the precursors to uh, the modern live play
Yeah.
explosion, which I hold up as the reason that role playing games are having the general renaissance they are. Um, do you think that there's another renaissance or another explosion to come as it um, there's a concept buried in that question I need to unpack a little. So uh,
Yeah.
role playing games, once everyone felt they could, when they came out in the 70s, when you and I got into it, we had to explain to everyone what it was, and then there
Right.
were a bunch of people that liked it, and there was a big boom, but there was still
Mm-hmm.
the next set. I think that recently with the live play um, video rev- revolution, if
Mm-hmm.
you will, it's now becoming more and more assumed that people will understand what role playing is, and
Yeah.
so as that generation is now getting to be college age and getting into their 20s, about the years that you and I went from playing to publishing. So I find myself wondering if we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years a new explosion of them taking it and running with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I have no doubt. I remember driving back from one of my early Gen Cons. Basically, a bunch of my New York friends and I would rent a van and drive to Milwaukee. Um, and it's a long drive, so we had many epic conversations. And on one of them, we were talking about the idea of like trying to start a game company and so on. My friend Sundeep said something I always remembered, which was basically like, well, like it's our turn now, like we're the next
yeah,
generation, and he was right about that. But now we're the old guys, Stan.
I know. You know what? As scary as that is, I'm okay with that. Uh, and I'm really
Yeah.
curious to see what the next generation is going to do. I see a lot of. I tell you that the interesting thing was after the release of third edition and the D20, we had everything compacting around that game. And recently, there's been
Mhm.
we've had different times when there have been explosions of new games, and they kind of come and they fall off and they fall off, and D&D sticks around. But it's accruing. Like there's more and more that stick around. Pathfinder has stuck around. Call of Cthulhu and and other things. Mutants and Masterminds, I think, here now stick around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
Mm-mm,
Oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Oh. Well, so things in RPGs are changing all the time, and younger gamers are doing all sorts of things, that I never thought to do, and exploring new ideas and stuff, which I think is great. Um, but it's also like so much easier to get started now than it
Hmm.
was in the 90s. Like essentially anybody can start to publish things, which is on the one hand great because DIY baby, um, but it's also subsequently harder to get attention because if you look at like Drive Through RPG or itch.io, like there's just a fire hose of new stuff coming out
Right.
every day. So it's so that I think that is a challenge for people getting into it now. Um, but I'm sure we're gonna see more new funky things. But and I also think there's a degree to which we are being forced into change by this whole tariff situation with the American government right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to end on a downer, but it's really bad for game companies. So
I one of the what just to build on one of the things you said, one of the challenges has always been where do you find out about the new cool stuff, and um, I think we're at a point right now where one of the things that would be super helpful to have someone develop it, or a couple of different groups develop, are platforms that are where you go to find out about what's going on. Right,
mhm.
something like EN World filled that role for in the D20 era. Like you could go there, you'd
Yeah,
hear about everything, and people would be talking about it. I don't. I know that there are Reddits and that there are lots of little places that are doing that, but aren't there aren't large places where you can count on going.
yeah, it's the diffusion I talked about earlier, right? It's the
Yeah.
same in news and release info and stuff. Um, I used to love my game magazines.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reason I loved them is I would learn about what was coming up. But I mean, there are PDF magazines like our own engine magazine.
I hear issue 2 is available now at
That's right. Issue two
the
just came out.
greenroninstore.com.
Yeah, that's right. It's a collection of articles for various adventure game engine games. That's what engine is. So check it out. But anyway, so there are things like that, obviously, but it's not like getting Dragon magazine every month and being like, ooh.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go, any thoughts about your 25th anniversary or things you want to make sure people know about?
I would like people to know that the first big adventure series for Fantasy Age Second Edition is releasing imminently. I believe it started shipping today. So this is it's like just a big swashbuckling fun adventure called Lost Island of the Pirate Queen, and I'm. It's possible you might be able to squeak in and get in on the pre-order deal where you can get the physical book and then the PDF for $5 more. But either of those are available in our online store. We haven't had something like this in a while, so I'm excited to get people out there playing a big swashbuckly fantasy age adventure.
Is
Um,
this connected to Freeport, which also has a piratey ish?
um, yes and no. One of the concepts we have in Fantasy Age Second Edition is something called the Stranger Shores,
Mm.
which basically it takes off from an idea we had in the old Freeport material of what were called mystic navigators. These are people who could basically magically navigate in between, you know, planes or plane-like things, travel great distances, and so on. So Freeport is part of that. It's an important part of that setting. But this particular adventure takes place in a different part of the Stranger Shores. So, but it very much has a Freeport vibe to it because it's pirates and lost treasure.
All right.
Yeah.
So folks can find all that over at greenroninstore.com.
Yes. Also coming up, we have the long-awaited Vigilantes Handbook for Mutants and Masterminds,
Mm-hmm.
and Modern Age Powers, which is basically a book all about how to create and use cool powers in modern age. But it's also very applicable to other age games. It gives you a lot of great tools if you want to do some rules hacking. Um, so yes, these are things that are near.
You know,
Oh,
I being a big Cthulhu fan, my one thing looking at our hour and a half is I would have loved to have talked more about Age of Cthulhu, but
oh yeah, Cthulhu Awakens. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Cthulhu Awakens. Um, but we'll save that for next time, I guess.
I recommend you bring on Malcolm Shepard, who was the lead on that game, and
That's a
he could talk
fine
to you all about it.
fine thought. This being
Yeah,
the 25th anniversary for Green Ronin, I may try and get some more Ronins on
yeah.
over the course of the year.
Not hard to convince Alex to talk about Mutants and Masterminds.
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I can handle Alex. All
Yeah. Um,
right. Well, Chris, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Just one last thing. We are in Free RPG Day this year,
Mm-hmm.
so our item in Free RPG Day is one of the quick starts we were talking about. So
There we go.
it's the Expanse Transport Union Edition quick start. So if you have a local store that's involved in Free RPG Day, get down there, see if you can get a copy.
Yeah. Oh, like I give all of the Green Ronin quick starts my heartiest recommendation. Go get them.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, I don't need to cut you off. I'm just like I promised I was going to try and get you out of here in an hour and a half. So I'm trying to live up to that. so, uh,
I mean, I'll
um,
keep talking as long as you want, Stan.
you know what? As I say at the end of these, I would love to have you back, and we'll do it again. Um,
Okay.
I'm talking. I'm keep talking about doing kind of roundtables where I have a couple of people on at the same time, and having maybe uh, some Green Ronin hook thing, or I don't know, a pirates thing, because we didn't even talk about
Hmm.
your the computer part of your career.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But Chris, thank you very much for coming here. I really appreciate it. It's been fun chatting with you, despite the fact that we live about, I don't know, 18 miles away. I don't think I've seen you in 3 years.
Yeah. I should come to a Wednesday barbecue some week.
And I should just get out more often. So, but yes, come to Wednesday barbecues. All right, if you hold on, I'm going to do an outro, and then you and I can actually say a friendly goodbye. But thank you
Okay.
for showing up.
Thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Okay, folks, there you go. That was my conversation with Chris Pramas. We talked about a whole lot of things. In particular, of course, the 25th anniversary of Green Ronin, which is happening this year. They've got a lot of interesting, fun stuff going on. greenronin.com is the place to go. As I mentioned before, their YouTube channel is Green Ronin Publishing, and they've got live streams on Mondays and Thursdays that you should definitely check out. For me and my stuff, as always, I'd remind you that we've got a free newsletter at 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com, where you can find out who will be coming up in future episodes, and you'll be the first people to see the finished cartoon homages once they're done. When I finish that Fantasy Age 1, You'll know it if you subscribe. It is, as I say, free. Yeah, there are paid versions, and I would appreciate it if a few people join that, but all the really good stuff is free. Join there. If you wanted to do something that was more in depth with me, you might want to join my Patreon, patreon.com/StanX, where anything I do, any of the art I do that's public facing, you get delivered to you. Plus, there are process videos and other behind the scenes stuff, and you get to be part of my community and help me figure out what it is I'm going to be working on next. So if you like all this and you want to join a group of fun people who also like this, come to patreon.com/StanX. Having said all that, I'm going to wrap up now. I'll be back tomorrow night with another episode of Random Encounters, the improv cartooning show I do. Next week on Random Encounters, not tomorrow night, but next week, we're going to be celebrating the second anniversary. We've finished 2 whole years of that show, and I'm going to be doing something crazy where I try and draw 100 characters in 100 minutes. And Troy, who was mentioned as being the host of the Green Ronin shows, will be coming on to help me facilitate that, because that's going to be a challenge. But it ought to be fun. Wherever you're watching this, that's where you can watch that show. Tune in and give it a look. Meanwhile, I'm going to take a break and stop talking, because apparently I'm losing focus. I'm starting to say things I don't even know what they are. Michael J. Passer says, "Geez, is that next week already?" Yes, it is next week already. That's what I say. I got a lot to do between now and then. All right, I'm out of here. Everyone, thank you for joining in. We've had a lot of people here. I really appreciate it. Oh, again, I said at the beginning, give me a thumbs up. Whatever it is on the platform you're watching, give me a like or a heart or a thumbs up. It really helps to get the show introduced to new people so we can have more people join in. If you want to help in that regard, also, when I wrap up this, you can go in and leave a comment. Leave a comment in the show notes. Just a quick, "Hey, it was so fun seeing Chris," or "Stan, you should shut up and let Chris talk more," whatever you want to say. If you leave a message, it will be super helpful, and I promise I will respond. That's all I can promise. So, thank you all for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.